What about the Championship? Let's talk about that then. It is the playoffs this weekend, isn't it? Leeds taking on Norwich, who they beat twice actually this weekend, but they've been so focused on automatic promotion that it feels like they've, had a bit of a drop-off in recent weeks.
They have, yeah. They kind of lost their form at the wrong time, didn't they? They have only won 1 of their last 6 to end the season, and defensively, they've really struggled as well. They've had 1 clean sheet in 8. I think they've conceded 9 goals in their last 3 games. They've got Daniel Farke in charge. He's kind of a master at getting out of the Championship, but he does that by winning the league, which he did twice at Norwich. He's not been in the playoffs, so I'm interested to see how he gets on. I would say as well that Leeds win over Norwich, the last one was on January 24th. It was a long time ago. And it was amid a 12-game unbeaten run for Leeds. Their form looks a lot different now. So it'll be interesting how they respond to that disappointment, as you say, of missing out on automatic promotion.
Yeah, they've had a couple of big blows, haven't they? That QPR defeat was so costly, the 4-0 loss at QPR, and then losing to Southampton on the last day as well. Of course, Southampton have had this disappointment as well in terms of missing out.
Actually, if you look at all the teams, they're all just all over the place a little bit.
Well, yeah, a little
bit.
bit.
To be fair.
With Southampton, they've had that same disappointment of missing out. They were close as well, weren't they? But their fate was kind of known a bit earlier. So for Leeds, it is fresher. So it's probably more of a challenge for them to put that behind them for these playoffs. I think they do still have an incredibly strong team. Loads of reasons to think they will make it through this tie against Norwich. But it's going to be a challenge to shake that off and come through and get to Wembley. Yeah,
it's interesting. They all got the collywobbles in these last few weeks. Look, they actually missed out, didn't they, on the automatic promotion, as Nick was saying, just by 6 points in the end. Does that mean anything, actually, Gail, in the grand scheme of things? Oh, OK.
So this is the data from the Championship. This graph, which I'm hoping will appear, shows all the promoted teams and by the number of points they were from achieving promotion. So here you can see the promoted side most of the time was within 10 points of second in 13 out of 19 cases. All the way up there, 21 points, that was Blackpool when they were promoted from the playoffs under Ian Holloway in 2010. So it's around the 10 points from promotion where you're most likely, or less, where you are most likely to be promoted. So it doesn't bode that well for Norwich or West Brom. They finished 21 and 23 points behind Ipswich, but it can be done.
OK, let's talk about Norwich then, because as I was saying, in terms of all the teams, actually they are in better form. Nick, does momentum count for a lot going into them? I'm
not sure it does, really. Okay. I'm not sure. I mean, yes, they're in slightly better form, but I think what's interesting about this is that none of the 4 teams are in particularly good form, are they? That's David Wagner has come under a bit of pressure from fans, hasn't it? It's been a difficult season for Norwich, really, very up and down. I think what is potentially significant is that he has been through the playoffs before. He got Huddersfield up through the playoffs, a long time ago. But to have had that experience as a manager, is probably pretty valuable in this context. So yeah, a tough ask for them against Leeds. I think Leeds will be favourites, especially having the second leg at Ellen Road. But Norwich shouldn't be ruled out for sure. I think they may be missing Ashley Barnes for at least one of these games, which is a blow. But one sort of ace up their sleeve is potentially Jonathan Rowe, who's just come back from injury. He's been used off the bench recently. He hasn't started for quite a while, but in these games, I wonder if he could have a say if he gets a chance. He's a really good, exciting, attacking player who was excellent in the first half of the season. So he's someone who could cause Leeds problems. I think they can go into it with a bit of belief. But we'll see. It's an interesting tie. We'll see which way it goes.
What are your thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, I would kind of agree with Nick in that Norwich also kind of aren't in great form. I think they had 3 games without a win to end the season, drew with Bristol City and Swansea, 2 kind of mid-table teams, lost to Birmingham on the final day. Obviously Birmingham were trying to stay up, didn't work out in the end. Yeah, like Nick says, interesting season. David Wagner kind of seemed on the brink. Norwich fans really weren't convinced by him, but if you look at the Championship table from the start of 2024, they're 3rd. So they would have finished in that 3rd position, top of the playoffs positions. But Leeds are actually ahead of them. Leeds and Ipswich are the 2 teams ahead of them. So they're 2 of the most in-form teams this season, Leeds and Norwich, just not in form over the last few weeks, unfortunately, for them.
OK. Well, let's talk about that then, form, and what it means going into the playoffs, and does that help going into them?
A lot, I think, is perception as well, isn't it? So let's have a look at some of the figures. These are the teams with the best form going into the Championship. And you can see Leicester took 15 points from their last 5 games back in 2010, but they didn't go up. In fact, in all but one of these occasions, the form team hasn't ended up being promoted. Only Brentford down there in 2020-21 bucked that trend. And if we take that a step further, in fact, 17% of teams who've been promoted have only taken 0 to 5 points in their last 5 games. 15% have taken 11 to 15. So it's the middling form of 6 to 10 points in their last 5 games that have been one of the ones that have gone on. So based on that, Leeds would be the least likely of the teams to go up. And maybe, as you'd expect, the team going up into the playoffs with the worst form has only gone up once before. So just Huddersfield in 2017. But look at this, Leeds have only taken 2 points from the last 5. Only once before has a team gone into the Championship playoffs in as bad a form as them, and that was Watford, and they didn't win promotion.
Okay. It's interesting, isn't it? And I think you mentioned a really good point about Daniel Farke as well. The fact that he's not been in this position before could be a bit of a hindrance for him.
Possibly, yeah. Like I say, the 2 times he's gone off have been by winning the league, which is great, but the playoffs are a different kettle of fish, aren't they? And as we say, David Wagner has been there before. He was in charge of that Huddersfield team. So, yeah, interesting dynamic between the 2 managers.
See who keeps their cool. Right, before the break, Gail was taking us through all the stats you need to know ahead of the start of the Championship playoff finals this weekend. So one more question for you, Gail. Leeds have beaten Norwich twice this season, while Southampton have done the double over West Brom. So does that mean anything?
Well, the short answer is, I don't know. No, but these stats may shed a little bit of light. Only 3 times have a side who've lost both the head-to-head games in the regular season have they gone on to make the final. So back in 2015-16, Derby beat Hull twice in the league, only for Hull to make it through to the final. Same again when Sheffield Wednesday's dominance didn't count, and it was Huddersfield that went through. And of course, Leeds fans probably remember this not too long ago, the double over Derby, only to be knocked out by them in the semi-finals. So only 3 times. Omens not looking great for those teams that have not picked up the victory.
OK. All right. So basically, if those stats are to be believed, we're talking about a Leeds-Southampton final.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, let's move on. No, I think the league table, over 46 games doesn't really lie, does it? And I think having watched both those sides a fair amount of times this season, I think they are the 2 best teams in the playoffs. I really like the way that Southampton play under Russell Martin. They kind of got these inverted wing backs, which everyone seems to be playing nowadays. Certainly the trendy thing, but certainly makes them good to watch. And Daniel Farke always plays decent football. Leeds play decent football. Both teams have got some really exciting players. So, look, you can't rule out Norwich and West Brom. They're both good teams and good managers. You mentioned David Wagner. Carlos Corberán is a really good operator at Championship level as well. But if I had to put money on it, or if I had to guess, I would say Leeds or Southampton, but it's the playoffs, anything can happen.
This is it. I feel like we have to caveat everything we say with the fact that it's the playoffs and it is just so unpredictable. But yeah, I've got a feeling for West Brom actually. I wonder if they could pull off a surprise against Southampton. Obviously, Joe mentions the style of play they use under Russell Martin. Obviously, very expansive, very attacking. I'd say about Corberán, he's probably more pragmatic. He sets his side up to kind of, based on what the opposition are going to do. So West Brom are a little bit more unpredictable, whereas Southampton maybe are a little more predictable. And I wonder if in a playoff scenario over these 2 legs, that could help West Brom, to be a bit more pragmatic and to have different ways of playing potentially. So that's something that makes me wonder if maybe West Brom could come through that tie. Even though man for man, you'd say that Southampton are the stronger team, in terms of individuals. I think that's a really interesting tie, that one.
OK, does that make you say that they're the strongest then in terms of who's going to be ready to go up? Out of all 4 of these teams, who would you bet against? Oh, bet for, not against.
Well, Yeah, it's at that point that you really look at the quality of the squad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Russell Martin's never managed in the Premier League before, so it would be new to him, but to a lot of his squad it would be pretty familiar, wouldn't it? They kept hold of a lot of their players. They've got a lot of Premier League quality in their ranks, so they'd be pretty, you'd think they'd be well set. I mean, Leeds as well have a lot of quality in there. You know, you think about some of those attacking players. Somerville, for example, excellent player, could easily cut it in the Premier League. Obviously got a Premier League experience before as well. So those two, in terms of their squads, I'd say those are probably the most suited. But yeah, it's not always the way with these things that the favourites go through, is it?
No,
Joe, who do you think's most suited to go up and ready to go up?
Yeah, I think Southampton and Leeds, just 'cause obviously they've got recent Premier League experience. They've both got, like Nick says, really good players who can definitely have cut it or can cut it at Premier League level. I would like to see Southampton, just from the point of view as I think Russell Martin's an exciting young manager. As I said, I like the way he plays. We haven't seen him in the Premier League. And I think it's always quite nice when you get teams coming up from the Championship. As someone who watches most of all the Premier League, I like it when teams like we had Luton this season, or like we had Vincent Kompany, who had never managed before in the Premier League. It's good to get something new. We've not seen Russell Martin before. Nothing against Daniel Farke or David Wagner, but we have seen them before in the Premier League. Certainly hasn't gone particularly well, particularly for Daniel Farke at times. Haven't seen Carlos Corberán either, so that'd be quite interesting to see him up. Haven't seen West Brom up there for a while, so obviously we can't choose, but I would quite like to see Southampton. I think it would be interesting having him and having Russell Martin and his team coming up.
Is that important to get this kind of change up? I mean, Kaveh Solokol was talking about this to me at the weekend, and the fact that because of the huge parachute payments that these teams get when they go down, often we see them come straight back up. And at the moment, in terms of the Premier League, we're looking at the teams going down, and it's the teams that came up, actually. And it's kind of like these, I think there's two teams that haven't played each other because all they keep doing is that.
Yeah.
You know, is it important that we start seeing other teams coming through this process?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from the club's perspective, what's important is establishing themselves at that top level and being able to do that. And obviously this season shows how difficult that is, probably more difficult than ever. You know, for Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United, it's proved really difficult. So that will be the challenge to these clubs coming up. But yeah, they may be in a good spot, a couple of these teams. I mean, in terms of who I'd like to see up, it's hard to pick really, isn't it? But I do have a bit of a soft spot for Norwich, and it would be quite nice to see that Ipswich-Norwich derby in the Premier League again. I think the last time that was in the Premier League was sort of 1994-95 season. Always have a bit of a soft spot for those early Premier League teams who kind of were in the top flight and then fell away a bit. And you know, when I think back to falling in love with football as a child, those were the teams I kind of looked at that time. So yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's always, the playoffs are always just fantastic entertainment, and whoever gets up will be delighted, of course.
Yeah, it's a great way to go up, isn't it, via the playoffs, but not sometimes the fairest way. And in terms of this, the money I was talking about, does the gap just get even bigger, though, in terms of the teams at the bottom end of the Championship, you know, and their struggles just continue because because of the parachute payments as well? Yeah,
it certainly feels that way. And obviously we've had this furore, haven't we, for a while now, where the Premier League and the EFL can't work out this deal with the money with the solidarity payments that would trickle down to EFL clubs. So yeah, you kind of look at some of the teams at the bottom of the Championship, like Rotherham, for example. They're a team who it seems are a bit too good for League One, but just can't really cut it in the Championship. They can't really seem to stay up in the Championship. And then you look at the top end of the Championship, and certainly some of the teams that are coming back down, like Burnley, for example. I mean, how many times have they got parachute payments? Burnley, they've been relegated quite a few times. So yeah, I mean, it's modern football, isn't it? The difference between the teams at the top and the bottom of the league financially and in terms of quality is just so big nowadays. You see that in the Premier League. I think we're starting to see it a little bit in the Championship as well. Yeah, we are, and we're certainly seeing that managers can lose their job if they don't get into playoffs, no more so than Liam Rosenior at Hull. I mean, that looked a really harsh decision. You've not made the playoffs, I think, for a couple of points, and you're out. Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of expectations and standards. The margins are so slim, aren't they? And they were so close, weren't they, to getting that playoff spot? And obviously, it's ended in real disappointment for Liam Rosenior with that sacking. I mean, I'm sure he'll land on his feet somewhere. You know, he's a really good coach, and I think we've seen that. So yeah, but it's another example, isn't it, of the kind of desperate need to get that promotion and get into that top flight for these clubs, and the difficulty in actually doing it and pulling it off. So yeah, only 3 clubs can go up, and there are always going to be many clubs disappointed. Yep, there certainly will be, and somebody will be very happy this weekend.